Hi, welcome to Nothing From My Side, where we discuss education, employment, and how stories by South African companies affect our daily lives. That's the intro. Hello guys, welcome back to my channel. No, sorry, it's your first time here. Welcome to the channel, Nothing From My Side. Just a disclaimer before we start. This video is not sponsored by my employer. It is not sponsored by my business partners or any company you want to mention here. Talking about companies, today we talk about SAICA, the South African Institute of Chartered Accountants, and this new framework they just introduced in 2021 called CA2025. Today we talk about CA2025, which is a SAICA framework that they introduced in 2021. Yes, 2021, but 2025. And it doesn't mean that they're trying to reach a certain number of CAs by 2025. What CA2025 is a replacement of SAICA's 2016 framework. And what it is about is SAICA trying to go at now, trying to build CAs that are more ethical and have skills to perform in any kind of environment. With the 2016 framework, what SAICA had was they used to track and rate competencies based on your technical abilities, how good you are at your technical work, and they would only track competencies that relate to your professional behavior and other skills that you would have, going to the point of calling them residual skills. However, with the 2025 framework, which was introduced in 2021, which are trying to ensure that by 2025, everyone has moved over to this framework. Every accounting firm needs to have moved over to this framework. Most firms now only have their third years during the 2016 framework. So with the 2025 framework, what SAICA now is doing is they are no longer going to be rating technical competencies, because SAICA believes that companies are going to ensure that you are technically strong, because if you're not technically strong, that affects the company's bottom line. So by them rating that, they're actually doing what we would call in accounting a double counting. So what do they rate now? They only rate two things: your skills and your behaviors. Skills being called Acumens and the behaviors being called PVAs, professionals, values, and attitudes. That's what we rate now in the CA 2025 framework. What does that mean in terms of the documents we've been using to track and rate our competency? It means now we change those documents. We are only going to be using now what we call LORs, which are the new SRs. SRs used to be the documents we would complete every 2 months, and now with LORs we need to complete one every month. I think this is much better administratively, instead of waiting a whole 2 months to complete this documents, and you need to remember, what did I do on this day? This competency there, scratching your head. Now you're going to be able to, within a month, complete all the Acumens and the PVAs that you have been exposed to that month. Again, the Acumens are your skills in simple terms, and the PVAs are your behaviors or your ethical behaviors, for you to remember it in a more simpler term. And the other document being replaced is the ANA. So now your summative document is no longer going to be the ANA, it's going to be the PDS, which is your professional development summary, which firms can elect whether do it every 2 months, 4 months, or 6 months. Of course, every firm is going for 6 months because they want to be in line in a way with how they did it before. In terms of role players, the role players are still the same. It's going to be completed by the trainee. After the trainee, it goes to the reviewer, and then it goes to the evaluator in terms of the ANA, which is now the PDS, and it will also finally be done by the assessor. So those role players do not change at all. What does change though? What changes is the way that we rate. In terms of the 2016 framework, we rated competencies. I almost said Acumens because I'm already thinking in terms of the CA 2025. That's why I had a little bit of a stutter there. But what we do in terms of the CA 2025 framework is we have changed the rating. In 2016, we rated competencies from 1 to 4. Number 1 being a rating of 1 being, okay, you haven't done this competency well, you haven't been exposed well to this technical competence, you did it, but you didn't do it properly. 4 was, you've done it so well, there was no intervention that was required in order for you to perform and complete the specific technical work that you are performing. With the 2025 framework, we now look at ratings of 1 to 3, which are 1 being foundational, 2 intermediate, and 3 advanced. And these are no longer talking about how well you did your work, how well you completed, but they're talking about your exposure in the technical environment, how well you know the work technically, how much you've been exposed in terms of your role in your team, what leadership you have, your autonomy comes into play. So as we said, we do not rate the technical competencies. We only want to record those to say you've been exposed to this. If you're in a banking industry, there will be certain competencies that you're supposed to be exposed to by the end of your contract. If you're in auditing, there will be certain competencies that you have to be exposed to then as well. Then we come to what we actually rate. First, we'll start with the behaviors, which we earlier mentioned were the ethical behaviors, or the PVAs, in terms of how SAICA calls them in the regulation. With the PVAs, for you to be scored either 1, 2, or 3 in terms of the ratings, there are 2 dimensions that come into play. One being frequency, which has to do with how many times you have been exposed to or completed a specific behavior. And 2 being complexity. And complexity should not be confused with the complexity of the task, but it's the complexity of your environment. Because as you mentioned, for you to move from foundational, intermediate to advanced, it's about how complex your situation is. So, for example, if you are in a more senior role in your team, then it is a more advanced role because you have it easier, you may get away easier with not being ethical. Therefore, it's more complex for you because you can make the decision to not be ethical and get away with it easier than someone who would not be in a position where they have that much of autonomy. So therefore, for them, their exposure would be intermediate. However, these ratings of 1, 2, and 3 do not mean that you have done this well or you have done this badly. It just shows where you stand in terms of your team. When it comes to the Acumens or the skills, also same ratings of 1, 2, 3 being foundational, intermediate, and advanced. With there are 4 dimensions. There's only one dimension that speaks to the Acumen itself, and that is the one of guidance. 2016 framework, guys, would remember guidance used to be a big thing because it was a difference between getting a 3 and a 4, which would mean you didn't have any intervention in completing your technical task. Now, what SAICA says in terms of guidance, for you to be at an advanced level of guidance means you must get little to no guidance. So SAICA is not saying you should not receive guidance. In fact, it promotes guidance. It wants you to receive guidance. You need to receive some guidance to complete the task. They further explain in SAICA documents that you're going to see in the bottom of this video, in the links in the description rather, that you are supposed to go back and get clarity sometimes, and that should not lower your level in terms of guidance. The next 3 dimensions that come into play in rating a 1, 2, or 3 are your task completion. All 3 of this relate to, again, your technical environment, just like the dimensions of the ethical behaviors. So 1, how do you complete your task? Do you follow steps that your firm already has in place for you to complete this certain task? If you follow those steps, then you are in a foundational phase in terms of your exposure. And the less steps you follow, then you move to intermediate. When you start to not follow any steps that are predetermined and are given to you to say, these are the process we follow, then you become advanced. Number 2 is the one of understanding the task. And that's not understanding the specific acumen, but understanding your task in a technical context. When you do your technical work, do you understand the work well, or is your understanding basic? Most of the time when you're still fresh from university and you're first studying articles, your understanding is still based on your university experience, your university knowledge, and the very little experience you have gained in the work environment. So it is understandable and expected that you may still be at an advanced level. However, that doesn't, may still be at a foundational level. However, that does not mean you do not do the work well. SAICA wants you to do everything well before we can even start rating. If you do not perform well in terms of a specific acumen, then it does not get rated at all, because the rating is just the plotting of where you are. Because SAICA is pushing at firms to now expose trainees to more complex situations in order for them to move to being all-round professionals who are professionally exposed and can be good in terms of their work, no matter what environment you put them in. So that you're not just a CA that's good in audit and now you audit for the rest of your life. We need to pull you there, put you in banking, and you need to still be good because your skills at an advanced level, your exposure professionally is at an advanced level. The last thing in terms of the dimensions for the Acumens is your autonomy. And this talks to your level of seniority in the team, not how many years you've been in the firm. Maybe you're a third year in your training or fourth year, 5 year, depending on your articles. But it is about the level of autonomy that you have in your team. How responsible are you for your work, for the quality of the work of yours and the work of others? So the higher your responsibility in those terms, the higher your advanced exposure. Therefore, you may then be at an advanced level. What I always say is to trainees, do not try to chase competencies, but chase competence. The more you get exposed, the more you work, the more you get yourself in these different situations, the more you may increase your frequency, the more you get more complexity, and your ratings will increase, and you'll get to an advanced level. What is the most important thing for CA2025 for you as a trainee? It's going to be documentation. Because there's no one to look at, there's no history in terms of CA2025 of how things have been done, and there are no examples available, except for the examples that we are going to put in the description of this video that we have created. We sat down while watching the Table Mountain in December, and we wrote all these examples for you, so you need to just check them out. They're going to assist you. But what's going to be the most important for you is documentation. You need to ensure that you document well how your specific activity that you perform links to that specific learning outcome. Because if your specific activity doesn't link to the specific learning outcome, you cannot even record it at all, you cannot start rating, and the reviewer should just reject the specific evidence. SAICA talks of the who, what, why, when, and how when you are documenting your competencies, or rather learning outcomes that they are now called. So you need to ensure that your learning outcomes are clearly described. You clearly describe the events that led to you having to now starting to rate the specific acumen or the specific behavior. And of course, you need to talk of how they link to each of all the dimensions that we have mentioned. We're going to put in the description also all the SAICA documents straight from their website that you can use and read, that can assist you in ensuring that you become a CA 2025.